Hey everybody, I just decided to do this impromptu video as I'm sitting here looking at the chart of the transits for this significant event that's happening this week, late Thursday into Friday for most of us, which is Mars stationing direct in Gemini. And I actually have my Gemini mug this morning that I'm using. I'm a Gemini sun, so I have that. It's one of my favorite mugs for my morning coffee. And Mars is actually stationing only 2 degrees away from my sun. So I've been impacted by this retrograde significantly, as it's had to do a lot with things that are going on in my sun world in Gemini. So as I'm looking at all of this, I just figured I would start talking about it because I haven't decided what I want to write for my blog yet. So as I'm looking at this chart, I'm seeing that, so I'm going to talk some astro speak here, guys, but I'll break it down, I promise. As Mars stations, it is activating the air trine. The air trine includes Gemini, Libra, and Aquarius. So as I'm looking at the transit chart, the moon is sitting in Libra, and Venus is sitting in Aquarius. A trine aspect is usually a supportive one. It is sometimes one that can get overlooked easily if someone has a lot of trines in their birth chart, because it's something that we take for granted, or it's something that just comes so natural to us, it doesn't seem unnatural. It's not a challenge necessarily like a square. It's just part of our natural abilities and strengths usually. So as this air trine is being activated, it tells me something significant is happening within the mental sphere. And so as we're looking at Mars in Gemini, we also want to look at the planet that is associated with that, which is Mercury. Mercury is still retrograde, but slowing again to turn direct in the sign of Capricorn. And Mars is actually sitting in the configuration that we call a yod or a yod or a finger of God to Mercury and the South Node. What all that means is that there is a significant amount of adjustment that is needed. And I know that we all have been feeling this at some level. Mars went retrograde around Halloween. And so all the things that have been processing around our desires, our willpower, what we want, and how we go after what we want, has been internally being reviewed for the last couple of months. And now that Mars is moving direct again, we may feel a sense of new motivation. We may have some clarity now around what it is that we really want to do, or how we want to act on what we want. As I'm looking at this air trine with connection to the moon and to Venus, you know, Mars is typically associated with the sacred masculine and Venus, the divine feminine. We just had this Cancer new moon and full moon, and I wrote a lot about it. I talked a lot about it. The moon is our innermost emotional space. It's how we see ourselves on a moment-to-moment basis, how we define our ego. And again, when I say ego, I'm not talking about the stigmatized word of, you know, you're so egotistical or it being a negative thing. We all need ego because it helps define who we are. Venus then, as a function in the human experience, is how we relate to ourselves, how we relate to this thing called the other, which is anything outside of ourselves. Mars is our instinctual drive. What is it that we feel we just have to do? And what is it that we can do instinctively, just without thinking? It's something that is our internal strength, and we just do it. We don't have to think too hard about it. Where it gets challenging is all of our conditioning. And that has to do with Saturn and Capricorn. So Mercury right now, sitting in Capricorn in a retrograde form, is asking us to review all of that conditioning. What kind of dialogue do we have within ourselves? How do we talk to our inner child? And how do we combat our inner critic? Where are our boundaries? And how do we establish them if we don't have them? And how do we then enforce them when necessary? So all of this is leading me to really focus in on, again, mental space, inner dialogue, conditioning, and boundaries. All of the things that we've been thinking about doing, all of the things that we have this drive and this desire to do for ourselves. What is one thing, just one thing, let's not get too overwhelmed, one thing that we can do to help us begin to change our perspective, to help us change the inner dialogue? And not just the inner dialogue, what is it that we are accepting about other people's opinions or other people's projections? Do we have to accept any of that? No, we don't anymore as adults. As children growing up, we had to accept the environment around us in order to survive. We had to learn coping mechanisms to manage and navigate our environment, whether that was with parents, at school, with other family members, just the circumstances we were in. But now we have the choice. We don't have to stay in that same conditioning. We don't have to think the same way about ourselves. We have the power to change our inner dialogue. So that's where I'm at now. I'm going to end the video. And I just wanted to encourage you that if you've been struggling with this, there are lots and lots of tools to help work on fixing or changing. And I don't like to use the word fix, but to change your perspective. If you want to work on changing your perspective, if you want to work on reconnecting to yourself, your inner self, and connect to your needs and your boundaries, I can help. Let's have a conversation. Let's look at your chart together. I am a safe space. Thanks for listening. Talk soon.